The Durian Heat, bringing big ideas and critical opinions in Southeast Asia.
Hey, this is Arlene.
Hi, this is Grace.
And of course, you are with us on our Durian Heat, where we bring you discussion related to this region, which is Southeast Asia. Together with me is a founder and also researcher of Politweet. His name is Kamal. So, hi.
Hi.
So, you're doing a very interesting job to me because you actually look at trends and the habits of Twitter users as well as other forms of social media users.
Yes, that's right, but mainly Twitter users in Malaysia.
Mm-hmm. But why Twitter? Like, why social media in general, I guess?
I guess because Twitter has a very open system for collecting data, and all your tweets are public. Whereas for Facebook, all they allow is access to summary statistics about how many people like certain topics. So it's very hard to get a sense of what people are talking about and what's trending within Facebook compared to Twitter.
It's very interesting because Twitter has become more popular compared to just a few years ago, and because of the limits that they can put those certain words in, and then people just daily just tweet about their lives and regarding the issues that's going around, and with the implementation of hashtag, it's even more popular than before, and that goes to other social media channels such as Facebook and YouTube and so on.
Do you use Twitter all the time, Grace?
Well, I'm not a big user of Twitter, but then I'm a big user of hashtags. Yeah, and that brings a lot of viral, news, and that hashtag makes everything viral once the issue becomes really hot.
That's true. I'm not a Twitter user too, but is there any particular age group of people who actually are active Twitter users?
It's mainly young people below 30. So.
Yeah, is that one of the reasons why a lot of the politicians nowadays, especially considering 60% of the population of Southeast Asians are the younger generation, younger than 40 years old, a lot of the politicians in Southeast Asia are joining the Twitter bandwagon. Just recently, it was yesterday reported that Jokowi, which is the president of Indonesia, had his first Twitter post on Twitter, on his official Twitter channel.
I guess that's another way for him to reach out the younger generation directly rather than going to Facebook, other media channels, I guess.
Do you see a certain trend happening right now in Southeast Asia when it comes to tweeting?
I'll say Twitter usage, you're talking about within ASEAN, Twitter usage is quite high, and at least for Malaysia, Thailand, Philippines and Indonesia, the coverage of the respective countries is actually quite good. But unfortunately I can't look into detail into this. Other than Malaysia, I can't look into detail because I can't understand their tweets.
But so when it comes to countries like Thailand and Indonesia and the Philippines, usually would they tweet in their own language rather than English?
Philippines, so far I haven't looked at it in great detail except on certain issues, but it looked to be mainly in English, or maybe the English content is what trended more than the native language. But for Thai, it's mainly in their own language.
That's harder to gauge, right? What they actually think about their own country or about themselves, since they tweet mainly in their own languages. Do you find any interesting hashtags or any interesting keywords from different countries that you try to analyze whatever issues that they have or whatever things that they discuss?
I can't think of a hashtag that's common to each country.
Let's go back to when it comes to word trending itself. When it comes to trending, what does it mean exactly? Because I'm not usually a Twitter person, so I don't quite understand.
On Twitter, when you see what's trending in your country or in your city, it usually shows what topic is newly being talked about. It's not necessarily what everyone is talking about right now, but it favors what's new and fresh. So that's why when you look at or when I look at the total volume of users, it might only be 100 people or 1,000 people, but it becomes number one trend in Malaysia because it's new.
I see.
And because I think high volume in a short amount of time, maybe that's what helps it to trend.
And it changes all the time in Southeast Asia. When it comes to top trending topics, do you see mainly entertainment topics, or do you see sometimes political centric sentiments being part of the top trending topics?
Well, in Malaysia this year there have been some political topics that made it into the trending list, like Najib Razak and Anwar Ibrahim when they're in the news. But in Southeast Asia, so far I noticed entertainment seems to be the main.
Especially K-pop, I suppose.
Yeah, K-pop is quite popular.
So I guess Korea can use K-pop policy as their foreign policy to Southeast Asia.
For sure.
Let's talk about different regions in Southeast Asia. You share with us this tweeting map where the Twitter penetration in different countries. Of course, in Malaysia, you see mainly in urban-centric areas, especially in the West Coast, more people are tweeting in those from those particular areas, partly because Twitter is more accessible by the urbanites compared to those living in the West Coast or in the central or peninsula, or even in Sabah Sarawak, which has very little tweeting activity. But you also see a lot of countries that have almost no Twitter activity, like Myanmar, Laos, Vietnam, Cambodia. Is it because they use different kind of service to engage among themselves?
Yeah, it's true, because Vietnam does have a high internet penetration, right, in the urban centers. Yeah, but for Twitter, it's hardly any users there.
Similar with South Korea as well, right? Twitter is not really a common app.
I will say it is not the common channel that people will use, because there are other apps that can replace Twitter, such as Kakao Talk and the Line, where even Koreans they are not much user of the Facebook even, because they can utilize them with other apps. So I guess in Southeast Asia, the social media when it comes to Twitter and Facebook is more popular than perhaps East Asia and other countries.
But it seems to be very popular in Thailand, Philippines, Malaysia and Indonesia. Is there a reason for that? If you can pinpoint one?
I can't tell you why it's popular, but at least for Malaysia, in Twitter's usage, I can see Twitter usage in both rich areas and poor areas. So I think that is quite interesting. I can get feedback from different parts of society that way.
It's also very interesting because perhaps the internet penetration in Southeast Asia, it's compared to other countries, it's still poorer. But then, and also perhaps because the Southeast Asia, they have not come up with their own app. All this Twitter and the Facebook, they're from the other countries.
They still need to borrow from Mark Zuckerberg and
I guess so.
and other American inventors.
Because of the branding and also the name, they still use it popularly.
And if you look at the map itself, you see that, for example, in Indonesia, it seems that majority of the Twitter activities center around the city center in Jakarta and or the whole of Java Island. But while in the Philippines, you see majority of the Twitter activity center around Manila, or the northern part of the Philippines rather than the southern parts of the Philippines. But also you see some Twitter activities happening in other islands in Indonesia, such as Sulawesi and the southern part of Borneo or Kalimantan. So it seems like even in like different regions, they have their own Twitter spots. Perhaps it's because when it comes to the urban area, it's quite diverse as well. Especially in Indonesia, they focus on decentralization, where they have major cities in different islands as well. In Thailand, you see majority of the activities are centered in Bangkok. How do you trace all these activities, or is it there on Twitter?
It's there on Twitter because one habit that young people have is to geotag their tweet. So every tweet they send out has their location attached to it.
What is geotag, by the way?
Oh, sorry, your tagging your latitude and longitude coordinates.
You're automatically on it, or you actually choose to be geotag?
I think you choose to. It depends on what application you use. But all these tweets are being sent out with their location. So when I collect tweets from ASEAN, then I get, it's a way of identifying where the populations are.
Anyway, we'll take one short break. When we return, we will discuss more on Twitter, of course, and of course the trends that is happening in Malaysia as well as other countries in Southeast Asia.
Gender equality is the way forward in Malaysia if we want to enjoy justice in all aspects of life. I am Ratna Usman from Sisters in Islam, and you are listening to Durian ASEAN.
The Durian Heat, bringing big ideas and critical opinions in Southeast Asia.
Hey, this is Arlene, and you're listening to us at Durian ASEAN, the voice of discovery and sharing. Of course, at our discussion on Twitter hashtags and what is trending in this region, we have Kamal from Politweet. He's a researcher and also founder of this particular research think tank, I suppose.
Yes, right.
So earlier on, we discussed, the ASEAN map on what is trending, what are the demographics of Twitter users and all that. Let's talk more about Malaysia, because Malaysia is your main focus when it comes to your research. What are the demographic of Malaysians and the habits of young Malaysians when it comes to tweeting?
You mean the demographics of the Twitter users? Well, right now it's mostly Malay-speaking population. Who are quite young. It's between 18 to 30, but leaning more towards the early 20s. And what they like to talk about, or what's most popular every day, would tend to be entertainment type content.
Is K-pop also dominating the conversation, just like other parts of Southeast Asia?
Only when they're performing nearby. I think there's a performance in Singapore recently, and then there's one in Thailand. So
when it comes to acts or entertainment acts that are performing at that current time, then it becomes a Twitter dominated topic or a trending topic.
Yeah, that's right.
I see.
Yeah.
What are other areas that they talk about besides that you can capture among young Malaysians?
Islamic content. So anything that's like a quote from a famous ustaz, or a prayer, any kind of images that show, like, teach Islam in some way, those can go viral in a sense. But
do you know why they talk about this? I mean, based on your observation on their tweets, do they talk more on just seeking advice or sharing advice from these ulamas, or they ask questions, or they mainly share their opinion about Islam? What is the habit of them when they talk about religion?
I think they like to share religious advice, whether it's their own or it's retweeted from somebody else. Sometimes I do see people asking questions, but I wouldn't say that's a common habit. But Islamic content is just really is very catchy locally. That and humor. Local humor, yeah.
Do they tweet in Malay or in English mainly when it comes to religion?
Mainly in Malay.
In Malay.
Yeah.
But that's for those who are Muslim.
That's right.
What about non-Muslim? Do they also talk about religion that much?
I would say other things.
Other things.
Yeah.
I see. So why Islam becomes a very core topic among young Malaysians, or young Malay Malaysians in this case?
To be honest, I can't really speculate why, but they seem to have a need to offer prayers publicly, and whenever there's an Islamic related issue, then they have the urge to sound out their own opinion, which is why Islamic issues tend to draw quite a large base of users that are tweeting about it. So there's no shortage of content for me to read through and see what their opinion is.
A recent Merdeka Center survey, it was conducted a couple of years ago, in fact, that show a lot of the young Malay Muslim, they tend to associate their identity with Islam much more than with race identity of Malay. Do you see when it comes to Islam, most of the comments, are they positive or negative?
Negative in what sense?
Negative as in like
you mean like critical of other,
or trolling other people,
well, when
or being judgmental?
when a suspected deviant is highlighted by the media, then yeah, definitely there'll be a lot of people that will come out to be judgmental about it. When it's positive, then it's general, but you know that there are issues where people will address an issue in the media by tweeting out the right position without making it personal.
Okay, besides religion, there's also seems to be a trending topic on the recent case of this particular Malaysian gymnast when it comes to issue of aurat, or a woman's body that shouldn't be exposed according to the Islamic dress code. This person is called Farah during the SEA Games when her photo was shared in one of the local media channels, social media, and it instantly became viral. What was the reaction in the Twitter sphere when it comes to her as a person? Was it really bad, or was it more towards encouragement towards her?
When it was bad, it's not bad in a personal sense. There was no name calling or insults to her family, so to speak. But the trend seemed to be that English speakers were behind her, even those with Malay names, and Malay speakers were a bit mixed. So you have people who are saying that it's okay, or it's wrong, but it's her problem and not our problem. And even some of the more kindly criticism would be like, her sins are hers to bear. And yeah, there's also another conversation that started at the same time about aurat. So this is where the defensiveness comes into play, where they don't mention her or even sports, but a lot of users in Malaysia suddenly started tweeting about the importance of wearing hijab and covering up, and how it's obligatory and that shouldn't be compromised, and so on. And that was quite a large scale.
So in a sense, Malaysians seems to be very judgmental of other Malaysians in the Twitter sphere.
Yeah, that's right. I think that's just one way to simplify it. Yeah, that's true.
But you said that there were a growing number of I guess English speaking Malaysians that are behind her.
Yes, but when you add up the totals, it would be like 50-50.
I see.
Yeah, so, and the religious population is one that's actually seems to be growing.
But it also shows that a lot of the more religious Malaysians, they seem to be very active on social media in sharing their views or promoting their ideals. And if you look at, if you go back to our earlier session when we discussed about the Twitter demographic in Southeast Asia, majority of the users are mainly in very urban-centric areas. More conservative Malaysians or Malay, they seem to use Twitter as much as those who are English-speaking and
that's true.
Or liberally inclined Malays.
Yes, that's quite true.
Very interesting trend that is happening there. And on the other hand, besides religion and also trends about religion, politics also seems to be dominating the Twitter sphere. And what are the recent issues about politics that are currently being discussed in Twitter?
Well, the most recent one was the Nothing to Hide forum. It was a couple of weeks ago. And when the Prime Minister didn't show up for that event, he actually drew a lot of criticism. And what was surprising was a lot of this criticism was personally directed at him through his Twitter username. And the Malay-speaking users were more critical of him than the English-speaking ones. So that showed an interesting feedback from this population, because I think they had been keeping quiet so far, but then suddenly they were triggered and then they lashed out.
But it's also interesting to see, based on the research that you have done, that a lot of people from the whole first year of 2015, they seem to talk a lot about Najib.
Yeah, but Najib is the most popularly talked about politician this past few years, so it's kind of to be expected, though it does look like it's picking up this year, maybe because of 1MDB.
But Anwar also seems to be widely discussed about, but mainly is it because of his jail term of the court case?
That was one of it, but he's also like consistently number 2 or number 3 after Najib.
And with the emergence of course, Tun Mahathir playing central role, especially during the Nothing to Hide forum, is he being talked about as well?
He is, but I can't monitor it specifically because people often say Tun M or Dr. M, and those keywords are too short to track on Twitter.
I see.
Yeah.
But what about the opposition party? Is there any opposition related campaigns that somehow related to Malaysian politics that are tweeted again and again?
The current one should still be hashtag Kita Lawan. But I don't think it's grown much. The last time I checked, it was 44,000 users this year, compared to say mentions of Najib Razak, which is 110,000. So it's just over half. But from my experience, opposition hashtag campaigns usually peak out at a certain point.
I see. Yeah. And of course, when it comes to socio-economy issue, I think GST, 1MDB and Tabung Haji seems to be very much discussed. In fact, if all of them combined, they seem to be as much discussed as Hudud, although Hudud seems to be topping the list when it comes to things that are being discussed in Twitter.
Yeah, GST was quite a big issue, but it was a bit difficult to track because it is a global keyword. So trying to filter that to the Malaysia specific group was quite difficult to do.
I see. So at the end of the day, it seems like when it comes to Malaysian politics, do you think the younger generation are in tune with what is happening in this country based on the Twitter trends there?
They're definitely becoming more aware now. I think especially once all these news articles about 1MDB and related stories come out, they're not censored from the media or social media, so there's definitely more things for them to comment on.
I see.
Yeah.
Well, this is the end of our second segment, and we will continue again with our discussion around Twitter and its trends in Southeast Asia.
Hi, I'm Froya. I'm a singer-songwriter from Malaysia. Please support your local music. You are now listening to Durian ASEAN.
The Durian Heat, bringing big ideas and critical opinions in Southeast Asia.
This is an excerpt on the impact of social media in political debates by TEDx Glasgow.
You know, what we came up with was a series of teaching exercises that we took into the classroom to get people to think critically about social media and how to engage with it and how to go online and interact. So there are several exercises designed to get people to look out for things. And then I suddenly thought, why are we just doing this for the classroom? Because if we actually look at what's going on online, it seems to me that everybody should know about this information. And what I'm trying to do is get across this message, and the reason I wanted to do TEDx was to get this out. And this isn't just about the Scottish referendum. This is important whether it's Democrats versus Republicans in America. Anywhere where there are political differences of opinion, we need to think about some of the things that I'm going to tell you about before we go online. So I'm going to start with tweeting, and this happens probably now during the day. We've not been drinking, we're in a fairly good mood, and everything is cogent and it's all going along quite nicely. it's not going too badly. This was an observation we very quickly formed when we were looking at what data to pick and what data to analyse. And we realised that the longer the evening went on, the more loose people got with their vocabulary and the more they engaged in tipsy tweeting. I am guilty of many of these things I am going to show you today. We're all human beings. Tipsy tweeting, I am very dreadful at this one. I'll be tweeting during the day and you'll be posting things on Facebook and I'll have a beer and I just want to know about my notifications. It's, you've got to go check on Twitter. What has anyone retweeted? I hope you're retweeting me now. So I want to know about my notifications. I'm absolutely desperate to see if anyone likes what I'm doing. If they don't like me, do I need to find more friends? Do I need to take better photographs, say better things? You get kind of a little bit, it all gets wrapped up and you have to take care. So it's there in the amber warning colour of tipsy tweeting. Please do take care we've all probably done this. I'm sure you can all, many of you can register with this. The one you should probably disconnect the phone so there's 3 types of tweeting. We've gone from tweeting to tipsy tweeting to tanked tweeting. So we could do hashtag tipsy tweeting, hashtag tanked tweeting. This really, just keep your phone on for emergency purposes, probably get in a taxi or just turn it off and go to bed. Hopefully I've not had too many of these occasions, but there are those occasions where you wake up the following day and you go, well, what did I really reply to that person, and was it what I hoped I had done? I hope I haven't put my foot in it. So the big picture message that I want you to take home, one of them, is don't drink and digit. Yeah, we've got don't drink and drive, we've got don't drink and dial. This is don't drink and digit. The research that we've done helped us inspire these 5 F's to avoid, which we put together as a series of teaching exercises, but I want to communicate those to you now. The first one we've come across before is the foul. So the first F to avoid is the foul. And this one we've looked at people's reactions to these different posts, and when it's really foul, it really winds people up, it gets people agitated and polarized, and people spin into these kind of, it can get quite nasty. So avoid being foul is our one piece of main advice. The second one is the false category, and these examples are examples. So the Scots are anti-English. That is an example of a fallacious post. You might find 1 or 2 people, or you might come across one person who is that way. You can't then aggregate that up to 5.3 million people and say they're all like that. And the same is true of the English. You can't come across one English person you dislike and then say that they're all like that. So the English can't accept other opinions. You might find one English person or a couple of English people who can't do that, but it's not all of them, okay? So we need to move on beyond that. And it's the kind of classic. The other things in terms of false. Now, whenever I'm on an airplane, I always like, when the stewards and the stewardesses are asked to cross-check. So you've got to go across and check the doors this way, yeah? And then they swap sides and they cross-check the other side. This is kind of what we advise doing, is that you should cross-check your information. So you might find something that's really juicy, and you think, God, I'm going to retweet that, but cross-check with the other side or triangulate with other different news sources to see what different people are saying about that particular point, to see how much resonance or truth there is in it. It's also very, very easy to write a false tweet or a false post, because we're being encouraged to condense this into 140 characters or a few words. Some of the most interesting things I've seen are people who they go up to their word limit and then they finish point 1 and then they repost another comment with point 2, and they write their essay across. They're using the rules quite intriguingly. But look out for false posts. It's very, very easy to fall in that trap.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Thompson, and remember, stay positive. You're now listening to Durian ASEAN, the voice of discovery.
The Durian Heat, bringing big ideas and critical opinions in Southeast Asia.
Hi, this is Arlene. We are back again on our discussion regarding on Twitter trends as well as what is happening around Southeast Asia when it comes to issues regarding on politics. So with me, of course, is still Kamal from Politweet. When it comes to specific issue around Southeast Asia, perhaps we can focus issue per issue. The most recent one would be the issue regarding on the Rohingya. So what was the trends at that time? At this time, since it's still happening?
Well, I think it was initial outcry when images of the overcrowded boats hit social media.
Mm-hmm.
And for my part, I studied mainly what Malaysians were saying, and I think the result of that study was, at least for me, it was a bit surprising because I expected less Malaysians to tweet about it, and I expected more indifference. But the majority of Malaysians actually supported rescuing the Rohingya refugees, and some of them even supported absorbing them into our society.
I see.
Yeah.
So that means maybe a suggestion towards Malaysia signing the UN Declaration for refugee status, I would suppose. but on the other hand, when it comes to Rohingya issue, I mean, there were also groups of people, maybe, I don't know whether they might be the minority perhaps, they seem to feel fear if we have an influx of refugees. That means Malaysia will be filled with all these I will put quote unquote illegal migrants in their eyes, and it will cause a lot of social and economic issue. Were that reflected in the Twitter sphere as well?
Yeah, there was definitely some concern that they would bring their ethnic conflict over here.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, I think they occupy about 10% of the whole.
Mm-hmm.
But the majority seem focused on saving them and at least housing them temporarily and sending them back.
Mm-hmm. So they focus more on the immediate relief for these Rohingyas.
Yeah.
But were there any focus on Rohingya as, being part of the Muslim Brotherhood, sort of trying to help them because
there's quite a strong sentiment there of a
religious sentiment to help them because of the sameness in religion.
Yes, and even when Philippines volunteered to house some of the refugees, there were users that were saying that Malaysia, Indonesia should be the ones to help our Muslim brothers, and shame on us. Look at Philippines. Then when Aceh helped, there was a lot of praise for Aceh as well. So the only global trend was more like shock and horror at the stories of what was going on, and also disappointment that the Rohingya bouncing back and forth between countries and just getting resupplied but not resettled.
Were there any bitterness towards the Malaysian government for not acting as proactively as they should?
Some, but it was not a very large quantity. I don't recall that. No.
I see. What about the post-boat people issue where they discovered the mass graves and stories about how they were being tortured especially in one Korean? Were there active users of Twitter talking about it?
Yes, but the volume was not high. I think it was too shocking, maybe, and there was no more developments after that. It was discovered. What happened next? Yeah.
So when you say that a lot of Malaysians were tweeting about it, were there any prominent Malaysian politicians actually voicing out this?
I didn't single them out because the way the analysis is done is really like a random sample of users. So I can't recall.
I see. So that's just the Rohingya issue. Moving on is another issue that was popular in Southeast Asia a couple of 2 months ago regarding on the death penalty against Mary Jane Veloso. She was a Filipino who still is in the jail in Indonesia. At that time, she was about to be executed by the Indonesian government, but at the very nick of time, the last minute where she was safe. How was the trending topic at that time when it comes to her case?
Well, there was a campaign started by Rappler, the Safe Mary Jane campaign, and I think that trended in Philippines. I'm not sure about Indonesia, but it probably did as well. And it's one good example of how Twitter can be used to spread awareness of an issue and increase participation in getting signatures for the petition to stay her execution, I believe. And what's most interesting about that was within a social network of people tweeting about Mary Jane, Rappler and its associated organizations only occupied at most 10%. So even though they started it, they did not dominate the conversation, and people are starting their own little initiatives within the network and getting more people to sign and be a part of it.
She was actually almost in jail for, I think, 10 years before she was finally being charged for death penalty. So why the very last minute of Twitter support by Twitter users? I
think it's because once the execution date was confirmed, I think that's when people started to really go all out to voice their concerns and try and support.
You see, the majority of the focus of Twitter trends were in the Philippines, but how it spread to other countries, especially to Indonesia?
We didn't really trace that path where how it traveled, but I'm assuming the Indonesian local news did highlight her case once the Philippines government was going to become involved in some way. Wasn't that right?
Was the sentiment in the Philippines negative or positive towards Mary Jane?
Positive in that, definitely in the sense they were supporting her, and I believe there was a mass prayer for her. But I did not follow the news on a daily basis. It's more like the conversation on the whole.
I see. Because it was really interesting to see how Indonesians were very negative towards the Bali 9 suspects at the time, and when it was the Bali 9 duo, the Australians were being executed. In fact, they were actually relieved and feeling joyous about this. They feel that it's part of them being nationalistic towards their government to uphold the death penalty. But when it comes to Mary Jane, seems to be a different kind of sentiment towards her.
By Indonesians?
By Indonesians.
Well, I couldn't separate it out because the most popular content being shared seemed to be mainly in favor of her, either originating from Philippines or from Western countries. And one thing I did notice was also confusion about the Bali 9, because I think 9 people were to be executed, so they just assumed that Mary Jane is part of that group.
I see.
Yeah, so that might have earned her less pity in a sense.
That's true. From Mary Jane, we move on to the ASEAN People's Forum, which a lot of the human rights concerns in Southeast Asia were being tweeted. Perhaps you want to highlight some of the issues that were tweeted during the ASEAN People's Forum.
I think the most common one was the issue of disappearing people in Laos, and one activist in Thailand named Billy, and the use of torture in, I think, by certain governments in ASEAN. TPP also was briefly popular, I would say. But I think about ASEAN People's Forum, there were so many issues, and each issue got retweeted a little bit. So it's beyond these few issues. I can't really say which ones were more popular.
And issues about LGBT, like the SOGI.
The ASEAN SOGI, yes.
ASEAN SOGI. And also the Women Caucus.
On, I think it was the second day of the People's Forum, the Women's Caucus images and tweets about the Women's Caucus was widely shared. But that covered a lot of issues as well, like sexual harassment and children's rights.
So in a way that human rights is definitely gaining traction in Southeast Asia, at least through the ASEAN People's Forum.
It is, but because the volume is not very high, I get the feeling that it's probably speaking to their own people instead of reaching outside the network of people who are already involved in human rights activism. So ideally, these NGOs will have some celebrity or politician trying to highlight their issues so that it can grow and reach a wider audience. And hopefully next year's People's Forum, there might be a change there.
So based on your work, you've discussed about ASEAN, about Malaysia, about key human rights issue in Southeast Asia. Based on your overall observation on the public opinions through Twitter, what can you share about it? What can you conclude about this?
I said Twitter is a good way to find out what the people are thinking, because it's not just coffee shop talk that gets broadcast on Twitter, but also whatever people are thinking at the moment tends to find its way out on Twitter. So it's almost like their personal diary in a way. In Malaysia, there'll be I would say there's a divide between English-speaking users and Malay-speaking users, and there might also be a divide between Muslim users and non-Muslim users, because when it came to tweets about hudud, there were almost no tweets coming from areas that were populated mainly by non-Muslims about issue of hudud. So there's a real sense that we are living in separate corners where we talk about our own issues and we don't talk about other people's issues. That kind of division is the sense of that.
Okay, thank you very much.